Budget and Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, January 21st, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the board room. Tonight we have Mr. Paul Caleri as the committee chair, and he will lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, the Land Bank has a presentation.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm trying to figure out the best. I'm a little short, so I'm trying to find the best place for you guys to see me and me go in the microphone. So my name is Natalie Boydston. I am the program director at the Tri-Cog Land Bank. So thank you for inviting me here to talk to you about what the Land Bank is and how we're working with the Gateway School District and also Monroeville and Pitcairn in those communities. So I think to understand a little bit about the Land Bank, the best way to kind of introduce it is the issue that we're trying to work on. So I'm sure everyone, actually I'm going to shut this. I have a lot of pictures. So I'm sure everyone has experienced properties like these before. Maybe you have one in your neighborhood. Maybe you drive past one to work. Maybe your kids have to walk past one on their way to the school bus. So these properties are properties that we call blighted. And blighted to us means abandoned, generally overgrown, vacant, and they're often also tax delinquent. So these like just looking at them, obviously they have a lot of negatives associated with them. Not only are they aesthetically not pleasing, they don't really create a safe feeling in neighborhoods. They also have a lot of direct and indirect impacts on communities. So like I said before, a lot of times they're not paying taxes. So they're not contributing to the tax base at all, yet they pull a lot of resources. So maybe code enforcement is out there often trying to find somebody to take ownership of the property. Maybe there's Public Works is out there cutting the grass and boarding up some of the windows, trying to make the properties feel a little safer for that neighborhood. And also a lot of times there's public safety calls. Police are called because somebody's trespassing, maybe somebody's trying to get the copper out of properties, or it's an attractive nuisance to wander into. And there's also concerns about fire, and also if they become unsafe, they may also have to be demolished, generally by the municipality that they're in. They also have indirect effects on communities. There was a study done in 2014 from the Tri-Cog Collaborative, and although the data is probably a little old, it probably still works pretty well in 2020, that if you live within a 150-foot buffer of a blighted property, it can actually reduce the market value of your own property by 15%. And 23.7% of Allegheny County residents live within a 150-foot buffer. And if you look here, it's the orange is the 150-foot buffer to kind of give you an idea.
I'm struggling to see the legend. Can you just tell us what the legend is?
Oh yeah, sorry. So this was the Tri-Cog jurisdiction back in 2014. That's not current. But the orange is a 150-foot blight buffer. So that's the buffer around a blighted property, and then the blue is a residential area.
Thank you.
So aside from the direct and indirect impacts and the exterior and how that can look blighted, you also can have concerns inside the houses as well. Sometimes they're filled with trash, and there's obviously a health concern associated with that. And so this is actually a property in Turtle Creek. It's on Mercer Street. So you can see that it was very blighted on the exterior. It was filled with trash and other items inside of it. And that's actually a property that the Tri-Cog Land Bank acquired. We put it on a landscaping plan, and we cleaned out the property. So that is kind of a good segue into what the Tri-Cog Land Bank does. We acquire those blighted vacant properties. We maintain them while we own them. So these are the original photos from, or original properties from the first slide. This one we unfortunately had to demolish. We got in the inside of the property and there was some structural integrity issues, so we ended up demolishing that property. But we maintain them while we own them. And then we work with the communities to create the most beneficial reuse for those properties that we can. To us, the communities are our members. So our members are actually municipalities, school districts, and Allegheny County. We can be anywhere in Allegheny County except the city. They have their own land bank. But we are an opt-in organization. So we currently have 22 municipalities, their 6 school districts, and then Allegheny County. And then if you look here, okay, the legend's a little bit better, but this is currently the land bank footprint. So we were established in 2017, so we're still a fairly new organization. And in those years, we've reviewed about, as of January 1st, 211 properties. I think we're up to like 213 now. And of those 211 reviewed, we have acquired 32 properties throughout our footprint. So this is our land bank current inventory. So how do we choose these properties? What does that look like? The members actually choose them. All these properties were brought to our attention by member communities. So we have generally twice a year. We have one in the spring, one in the fall. We ask our members to submit properties to us. We do it in cohorts because we're small staff, so it's just easier to manage those properties at that time. We put them into our information system, and then we go out and we meet with each community that has submitted properties to us. And we start talking about strategy and the plan for those plays for the properties that they submitted to us. After that, we go and visit each property just to do an initial review, see what they look like. After that, we go in as a staff and we kind of choose properties based on the meeting and those exterior or the initial reviews to try to determine which ones that we want to evaluate further. And we do exterior property assessments on those properties. We do exterior property assessments because we're not allowed inside the properties, so there is some risk involved in acquiring properties because entering them is considered trespassing. So we try to minimize the risk by seeing what the exterior looks like and seeing what we think the interior might look like. So, you know, if they have a natural skylight, we like to call them, or AKA a giant hole in the roof, or it's a very modern concept, and it has, you know, no walls, including like the back wall to the yard. It's probably not a property that we're like looking at investing in at this time. Currently, we're really trying to focus on properties that we can rehab, get back on the market, and have a responsible owner take care of those properties. That's not mean to say that we won't consider look at demolition in the future. Just right now, we're really trying to focus on properties that can be rehabbed and saved. So once we put together do an exterior property assessment, we then score the properties. We look at market value. We look at, is that the only house that's blighted on the street? Can we go in there, stabilize that house, and then that neighborhood's pretty set, or are there multiple houses on that street that need to be addressed and looked at in a more comprehensive view? We also look at, is it near a community asset? Is it near a school? Is it near a playground or a pool? Is it on a major thoroughfare? And so based on, we compile all that scores, we discuss as a staff, and then we bring our recommendations to the board of directors to vote on for approval for acquisition. And if they give us the thumbs up, we send 60-day notices out to all 3 taxing bodies to say, hey, we're really interested in this property. Are you opposed to us taking it? Actually, I think you guys should be having a 60-day notice coming up pretty soon about a property that we're looking at in Pitcairn. And that's just kind of our way to check in to make sure that everyone's on board with the land bank acquiring the property. And if you say no, we won't acquire the property. After that 60 days is over, we start the sheriff sale process. And so that timeline depends on properties. The sheriff sale process goes smoothly and we can get it within a few months. Sometimes it can take over a year. So it really depends on the property. So what happens once we acquire a property? I think that's a good segue into what do we own in Monroeville, or Gateway School District. Currently, we only own properties in Monroeville. We're actively pursuing some in Pitcairn right now. So we currently own 3 properties in the Gateway School District footprint. They're all in Monroeville, one on Poplar, one on Alpine Village, and one on McKinney. So once we acquire a property, the next day we go out and we secure it. So we change the locks. If anything, windows need to be addressed and boarded up, we do that. We also start putting it on a landscaping plan. We contact our contractor who does landscaping. Does it need a heavy clean out? Does it need a light clean out? So we really start working on that as soon as we get there. So in terms of direct investments with these 3 properties since we own them, the direct investment has been around $22,339. We still haven't finished working on all these properties. Poplar still needs to be cleaned out. We're going to continue removing snow. We're going to continue mowing the grass until we sell them. That's just kind of our initial direct investment. But moving in, we really feel like there's a indirect investment to the properties as well. So when we go in, we secure the property. So we're really hoping that neighbors and families within that neighborhood start to feel safer because somebody is actually now accountable for this property. We make it look more attractive, and we really hope that it starts increasing the stability of that neighborhood as soon as we move in. And we're really hoping that people see us as good neighbors. And another big benefit is once we own these properties, we put a big sign in the yard that says this property is owned by the Tricog Land Bank. So that way, if any issues arise, like you have a tree fall on your property, like what happened in Alpine Village, you have somebody to call who can address it immediately. So we did have a tree fall on the property this summer. Luckily, no one was hurt, and it didn't fall in the house, which was a really good thing. Within a day, we were out there. Within about a week and a half, we had the tree removed. So if we hadn't owned the property and no one could find the owner, who would have had to pay for that tree removal? How long would it have taken? So we really hope to bring a lot of direct investment, but also indirect investment with us just being there, and communities and neighborhoods starting to feel safer with us there. On top of that, I really enjoy pictures, so I kind of think everyone else likes pictures. So we just cleaned out for 112 Alpine Village, so I wanted to share some of the clean outs. This one was actually comparatively not that bad. We were pretty excited when we walked in and could actually see the floor and walk on the floor. Just a few. And you will notice here we do have one of the back windows boarded up. We try to keep boarding up to a minimum on the front facade of properties just because it doesn't look really nice and it doesn't really make you feel safer. This one is a back window. It doesn't face any other properties, so we just boarded it up because it was kind of the best method at that time. And then in McKinney, we actually replaced the roof because there's one of our lovely natural skylights. And so while we owned it and kind of are figuring out the disposition path for this property, we wanted to put a new roof on it to make sure that there was no more water damage to the interior. So I think that also then leads to, are any of these properties for sale yet? And no, none of the properties in Monroeville are yet for sale. The reason for that is that we want to make sure that when we sell the property, we sell them with clean, insurable title. And so in order for us to get title insurance on the properties, we have to go through a legal action called quiet title action. And it's just it's so that if a contractor 20 years ago did some work on the property and for some reason that didn't get resolved through the sheriff's sale process, they can't come after the new owners and say, hey, you owe us $20,000. But for title insurance companies to feel comfortable offering title insurance for our properties, we have to go through this legal action. And it's the first time anyone has gone through it in Allegheny County through this process. So we've had 2 cohorts go before. The 3 Monroeville properties are actually in the 3rd cohort, and they're working through it right now. So I can't give an exact timeline just because we're still kind of working out that process. But hopefully soon we'll have them all available. And then in terms of that, our whole application process is available online on how you can apply for properties. So we have some baseline criteria. So if you own a house that has tax liens on it, or if you own a house that has unremediated code violations, or one that has history of criminal activity, you can't buy a land bank house. We also have, if we sell a property as is, we will include an estimated rehab cost for that property, and also a punch list of minimum items that need to be done to make that property safe. I actually got a phone call this morning from somebody who was interested in one of the properties in Monroeville, and she was asking about what the property looked like inside, because she had some concerns if she could afford a lot of rehab. And I explained the process that once we do post it, if we sell as is, we will have an estimated rehab cost and a list of what would need to be done. And she seemed like that made her kind of feel better, because she knew what she was going to be getting into if she was going to acquire a land bank house. So we have the application process, and then another benefit is that we don't have to sell to the highest bidder. So if you have somebody who has lived in, let's say, Pitcairn, and they've been renting, but they really love the community, they want to stay in the community, they have kids, they want to keep those kids in the school district, and they find a property that they can afford, that the land bank owns. They can fill out an application and submit it. And let's say somebody else comes in and they just kind of want to flip it and be a responsible rental property, but maybe, in Pitcairn it's really important to have owner occupancy, and this family has really invested in this community for a number of years. But let's say their bid's a little bit lower than the other one. We have the discretion to choose the applicant that the community is more interested in owning that house. And I think that also kind of comes, because a lot of times we get questions about sheriff sale, and why not have properties go through sheriff sale, because a lot of times if third parties bid on the properties, then you can recoup your tax liens on the properties. And I think part of that is that you can get a really responsible third party, but you don't know necessarily if you're going to get a responsible third party. Somebody could sometimes maybe acquire a property at sheriff sale, not have looked at the property before, go see it, realize they're way over their head, and walk away, and then you're kind of back at the start of the process again. And maybe the next time sheriff sale comes around, that property needs to be demolished. Or somebody maybe puts a coat of paint on it, gets some renters in there, and they have a family with kids, and that's not really the safest house, because certain items haven't been addressed that need to be addressed for safety. And then, so looking forward, we actually have 3 more properties. Acquisition in progress means that they're in the sheriff's sale process right now. So we're not quite sure when when their sheriff's sale date is up, but we have 2 in Monroeville and 1 in Pitcairn. And then the target for acquisition, the one with the 60-day notice out, is in Pitcairn that I was talking about earlier. And we're also currently evaluating 5 other properties for acquisition. There's 4 in Monroeville and 1 in Pitcairn. All right. And then I always like to talk about, so the land bank is one tool to use in a toolbox. And we won't fix the blight problem, and we won't fix it overnight. But it really helps to be able to work with other organizations, other regional or community-based organizations. We are currently working in Braddock Hills on a multi-pronged stabilization effort. They're helping us rehab 2 houses, and then they also, I think it was last year, the summer before, they helped do some maintenance on owner-occupied houses to try so residents could stay in their houses, to really try to increase the stability in that neighborhood. So we're always really looking for partners to collaborate with and work with to really increase our impact. All right. And then this is just our board and advisory meeting schedule for 2020. If anyone is interested in attending, we'd love to have you. And then I'm around for kind of my presentation, so if anyone has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer any.
Do you know who the reps are, maybe on the board?
On the board?
On the land board, Bob Asher?
No, he's the,
Oh, he's a professional.
yeah, he's a professional, yeah. The advisory committee, Mike.
ready for sale, how do you advertise it? Do you go through realtors? Do you just go through, since you haven't done that yet? Okay, my question is, the one that you have on McKinney.
Yep.
Okay, you showed the pictures. I have a couple of pictures too. Somebody had contacted me. You want to pass these around front and back? I don't know if there's enough. Just alone for that, looking at McKinney, you put a new roof on it. How much was the roof that you put on it? What was the cost of that?
I think that's the only one in Monroe that we put a new roof on. It was $4,460.
So, $4,460 for the roof. Okay, so when you look at the house, I mean, I have the front and back. The assessed value on that, there's 64, sorry, 62. Okay.
There's no violation.
From the money that we have put in here at the Gateway School District, okay, I'm talking Mr. Schott, back in July, we have already put in $49,000. Okay, the school taxes that would be estimated on that property would be approximately, trying to see what it was. It would be like $1,200. So we would have to sell like 13 properties at that assessed value to get our money back. So we're looking at how many years down the road. This is my question. I'm looking at, when do we see an income coming back?
So that's like a direct investment.
Correct.
I mean, I don't have a clear answer. I mean, we were established in 2017, so we're trying to build in a really thoughtful, comprehensive way that also makes sure that we're sustainable as well. So I understand that there's been a lot of investment from the school district in the land bank already, and we own 3 properties right now. But as we continue to create these policies and procedures that the thoughtful policies and procedures that will hopefully help us continue to build and invest in more properties as we continue on, so that hopefully our inventory will grow a lot more in the next coming years. The other thing is, I mean, I think there's a lot to say about direct investment, but the indirect investment is also really important. We're really hoping that just the land bank coming in will make neighborhoods feel safer, because somebody knows that there's somebody there taking care of the property, and also hopefully increase stability. So people will want to move there because not only do they know that there's a good school district there, but also that the neighborhoods are safe. Their kids will feel safe there, they'll feel safe there, and that there's stability and investment going into the communities to build it. And then also after maybe their kids grow up and aren't in the school district anymore, they choose to stay because they like the community, because it's a strong community and it feels safe. So I can't, in terms of direct investment, I can't answer when there'll be a plus, but I think there's a qualitative answer to that, and then a quantitative, and then there's a qualitative. And I think it's really hard to put dollars and cents on that feeling of safety and stability in a neighborhood. And we are gathering data as we acquire the properties and as we move through the maintenance and as we create our systems out. And we're trying to create as much data that we can analyze later to make sure that our how we select properties and how we move them through the maintenance and our policies and procedures goes faster and smoother. So we're continuing to gather that data, and hopefully we'll be able to show more of those numbers soon.
So the money that we are putting here as through Gateway School District, you're able to acquire properties in the other surrounding school districts that belong to the Tri-Cog, correct?
Yeah, yep, and they also have annual contributions as well.
So our contribution is 5% of the delinquent taxes. I believe that's what's in it. So depending I don't know if you made a payment yet for this year, Mr. Schott, because I was in the contract, it shows that it would be end of the school year would be, well, I shouldn't say school year, the calendar year would be 12/31. we have already put close to 50,000 in, and we haven't seen any return at all. So our job as board members is to watch the
Yeah, definitely.
people's taxes. So, like I'm saying, correct me if I'm wrong, it's gonna be at least 10 years before we see any kind of a profit coming back.
Oh, okay.
So that was something that we talked about when we first approached the school board.
Could
that
you go up
this
to
is
the
not-
mic so the folks at home can hear,
Oh,
please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Settlemeyer with the Turtle Creek Valley Cog. And I helped put together the land bank with Ian Lewis and the Steel Rivers Cog. This is a tool to mitigate blight. So these are properties that the private market is not, solving. You have these. So I think that it's tough for school districts because it's never really been conceived that it's really the school district's priority to think about property values necessarily, that that's a municipal issue. But I would argue that there are certain issues that we all have to work together on through a collaboration. Otherwise, they're not going to be remedied. The land bank is a tool. You're not going to get a dollar for dollar investment. You have to, which I think that's what Natalie was trying to say, is that you have to look at the benefit beyond just the dollar. What happens to these properties if they just stood there, and how it devalues the neighboring properties beside it, and then how that blight builds over time. And we've seen this in neighboring communities not far from Monroeville or Pitcairn, that blight is sort of a cancer, and left unmitigated, it grows. And so what's the solution to that? I think we as COGS trying to figure out what those solutions are. Code enforcement's really important. We think land banking is an important tool. And I will tell you that Monroeville and Pitcairn, Gateway School District in particular, has benefited maybe the most out of any of the other school districts here, benefited in terms of acquiring properties. And, you have 5, 6.
That we
No.
own. We have
Three that you
three
own,
coming, and then another one.
Yeah,
And
but
then
I would
it's
argue
expensive.
One thing that you said, that it wasn't in our best interest to be concerned about property values, because it absolutely is in our best interest to be concerned about, maybe you misspoke. It is in our best interest to be concerned about property values, because that's how we generate our income, and that's why, we send Bruce Dice to court all the time over property values. Because if our property values go down, the school's revenue goes down, and/or we have to raise our taxes on the people in this community. So it's very hard to measure,
Yes, it's hard to measure.
but in the big picture, I think it's very valuable.
Well, what I'm saying, Mary Beth, you have the pictures. If you look at the property that we have already acquired, we acquired that 3 of 2019. All right, the pictures, if you could pass them around. Just the back, that it's the assessed value, I'm looking at 62.4. You're showing the front of it, you're not looking at the back. The people, I acquired these pictures from residents that reached out to me. So you're looking at the front of a picture, but the back of this, it's the same of
It's just
all.
the same thing as in here. What do you?
But you're not looking at the front and back.
Oh,
This
this.
is what,
You're
correct.
looking at this house.
That's the house. So how much more work is going to have to be done? It looks like there was an addition that was pulled off to make it safe. This is what I'm looking at as a taxpayer, okay? I'm not gonna go there and say, okay, this is worth 62.4 and put that on the market. And I'm just looking at what we are investing yearly with what our dues are. What is your current fund balance that you have with the COGS? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check, and I can check you on that.
Okay, because that's what I'm just wondering. And then, where do you hold the money that you get? Who decides, the money that Gateway sends? Where do you hold that? Is there a return on, like, an interest with the value of money that you get?
I'd have to ask Ian about that.
Okay. See, these are just some of the questions, and that's why I say, it's a good idea, but I'm just looking at the return, what we're going to get back as a school district, and how long before it does. We're putting money out, and with nothing in sight coming back.
I think the previous school board that decided to come onto the land bank understood very well that this is a long-term
Correct.
process. It's not short-term.
It's not a dollar for dollar investment,
And it's
which is
not
what
a dollar
she's
for
trying to
dollar
explain. It's kind of looking at the long-term effects of our community. Do we want to address blight? If we have blight, is it going to attract more blight, as you said? Is it going to attract other problems that are detrimental to the community that you can't measure dollar for dollar? It's not like buying a bond.
It's not traditional.
It's not
investment by any means.
it's not an investment that's just specifically for financial gain. So you have to weigh that overall value, and some of those factors aren't measurable, and some of those factors you might not see the benefit for a long time, as Amanda said.
Like I said, I'm just looking at property owner and the taxes that we put up to see a return. I mean, that's what we are trying to do here. There's other things, that's my thought. That's why.
I've got concerns here. One is, kind of alluding to what Mrs. Warren was saying, is that, we've been putting in, she said about like 49,000 so far? 49.5, okay. And I understand the point of Tri-Cog because we have other districts and communities that are, joining in on this. But one of my concerns is we're using essentially Monroeville tax-paying dollars that's applying to communities outside Monroeville. And unless the community of Monroeville wants their tax dollars being applied to outside of the area, I mean, I don't see how that's, fair to them to be paying for paying for Penn Hills or Clairton.
But all those communities are given to us too.
I understand that, but at the same point, like, not every district around us is part of this, so,
I can
we're
see that
spending tax dollars.
if we weren't seeing
other
any
communities.
properties in our community. But I think how do you try to evenly make sure you're hitting all the communities
Yeah,
that are involved?
Natalie is staff on the land bank. I am not. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations. Ann Lewis is the executive director there, but yeah, it's a collaboration. Everybody talks about shared services and how we should work together and cooperate. Well, this is it. And sometimes in collaborations you win, and sometimes you give. But hopefully at the end of the day, when everybody pools their resources to try and make a difference in these properties that languish and produce more problems around them, that at the end of the day, we all win because we've come together collectively. We can't do this alone. We know that. An individual municipality cannot mitigate this stuff on its own. An individual school district. We had to build capacity through the Tri-Cog land bank of, you saw the number of school districts, just to make it work. I mean, this does not make money. This is why you don't see the private sector coming in. This is going to be expensive, but at the end of the day, it preserves your other property values, and that's the whole goal of this. In our initial presentation, we had a slide that showed a stable neighborhood with one bad apple. And I always thought that the land bank was the best tool in a place like Monroeville and maybe Pitcairn, because you have really good market value still in Monroeville, but that one bad apple could really devalue the property values around it unless you have an intervention. And sometimes when there's so much tax delinquency that's built up on a property, nobody from the private market's going to come in and flip it or acquire it or purchase it because there's too much debt on it. That's where the land bank comes in. So what value do you put on that? What happens if the land bank doesn't do that? Maybe that's a way of thinking about it.
Amanda, thank you for coming. Amanda, I was in that exact neighborhood about 6 years ago, knocking on doors, campaigning for an office I was running for. And as I usually do, I knock on the doors, and sometimes I talk to some of the people for a long time, sometimes a short time. And as I walked through that very neighborhood, I got the sense that the Lord wanted to do something in that neighborhood. And I said, where is this coming from? What does this mean? Sure enough, I knocked on a few more doors and I said, what's going on in this neighborhood? And the guy pointed to this very house across the street, and he said, I'll tell you, I have to move out of this neighborhood. I have to move out. I don't want to. It's going to be a terrible devastation to me to move out of this neighborhood. But I can't have a drug place that the kids come in at night, they use this drug place. I said, have you called the police about this? The police can't do anything. They're aware of it. They have to catch them in the act. It's very difficult for them to do it. Plus, there's another house down the street that's doing the same thing. It's dragging the whole neighborhood down. So I scratched my head and I said, okay, Lord, if it's true you want to do something in this neighborhood, what in the world would you want to do? So I opened the Bible and I looked at 2 Kings 2:19, where Elisha took some salt and threw it in a poisoned well and turned the water pure. And I said, what? Could we do that? So I got a little sign and I set it up and I put it on the corner of McKinney and Marguerite, and it said McKinney Street Neighborhood Meeting, illegal drugs, invited. And I invited concerned citizens, drug dealers, and parents with a key story. I wanted the drug dealers to know that we know they're there. So I invited the drug dealers. October 19, 2013, for a 15-minute meeting. The action basis was 2 Kings 2:19. So I walked out there at the exact time, and I stood there. Nobody came. Stood there another minute. A dog came. Stood there another minute. People started coming out because they were wondering what this was all about. I said, okay, so we got 5, maybe 10 people here. We all know that this house is the problem and it's dragging everybody down. And everybody said, yeah. I said, well, what can we do about it? Everybody said, I don't know. I said, I don't know either. So let's pray. So we just said, our Father, let your kingdom come. Let your will be done here. And specifically on that house right there, we pointed to it. We said, amen. So here it is 6 years later, and I'm stunned and surprised to see that this is one of the houses that you've chosen. And you said, Amanda, it just takes a long time. I'm surprised it's taking this long. But my encouragement to all of us is be patient and have faith. God wants to do good things, not just for us and our taxes here, but if we do something good for our neighbors, he leverages that somehow back onto us. I don't know how he does that, but that's what he wants to do for everybody. I'm amazed to be part of that and watch it, and I'm also pained to be part of that and have to see it. So I'm in favor of what you guys are doing there, and if it's there anything that we can do to support you and support our neighbor, because let's say that the drugs come into Penn Hills and nobody does anything about it, and kids die here in Monroeville because they get the Penn Hills drugs. That affects us. It angers us. So let's do something great for Penn Hills, and let's have them do something great for us. I don't know how that works, but I trust that God, we just prayed here. One nation under God, including Marguerite Street and McKinney Street, and including Gateway and Penn Hills and everybody else. One nation. We need God to move and expose these poisons, and he knows how to do it. We don't.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I can say for sure, and the data demonstrates, is that blight in particular does not care about municipal boundaries, and it will push and encroach unless there are tools in place. We can see it in some of our neighboring towns, what happens when there are no tools in place. So some of our work is practical, some of it's going to be mission driven. I say "are" because I still that's why I'm here tonight, because I do believe in the mission of the land bank. But yeah, it's important work, and necessary work, but it is expensive too.
I got 2 quick questions. And I was part of the group that voted in the land bank. I'm good with it. First question is kind of a devil's point. If we're a larger school district, so our dues are higher, is there weight given to blighted houses in our area versus another area that, so it's not necessarily a 1-to-1?
Well,
I thought it was.
so there is a algorithm they sort of go through when they look at properties and they, judge them. But the fact that this is why I think the tool's the land bank's such a great tool in Monroeville, is because you still have market value. That is going to set you up for having more properties acquired by the land bank, because it's a safer investment for the land bank, than going in places that have less market value. So is it a good tool for Monroeville? I firmly, full-heartedly, as sure as I'm sitting here, say absolutely yes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my mind.
One more question, because I know you can't control the sheriff's office and God knows. But the part that we can control is once you acquire the house and put the TCLB sign in the front yard, how long does it take to now get that house on the market?
And that's something we're still working on. So, as I said before, the quiet title action, it takes a little bit, because it's a legal process.
That's a part we can't control either.
No.
The part
So,
we can't control is like, how soon are you rolling in contractors and
yes, yeah.
then how long is that taking?
For landscaping or?
Average, to get that house, to get it to market.
So, yeah, to get it to market. So there's also, in Allegheny County, there's a 9-month redemption period as well that we have to be mindful of. And so if somebody can claim that they lived in that property prior to it going, like right before it going to the sheriff's sale, they can claim that if they pay all the taxes on it, they could technically get the property back.
Oh, well,
the chance
after you've
that,
acquired it.
after you go through
Oh,
sheriff's
wow.
sale, yeah.
I didn't know.
And that happening is probably not terribly likely, but there is a chance that could happen. So that's one aspect. And then we have the title insurance. And that we are starting to since we're kind of gearing up and like learning these processes, before it took a little bit to get them into going through that process. But now as we acquire them through sheriff's sale, we're gonna start pushing them through that quiet title process, through that legal action once we get them. So this hopefully will start to create a little bit faster of a system. In terms of getting them contracts for like landscaping and things like that. Once we acquire it, we start to create a list of what needs to be done, and we try to get our contractors out there. We generally wait until after we get the deed for the property, just legally. But then we try to get that as quick as possible. Sometimes if we're out there and we can manage some high weeds, we'll just take a trimmer, just because we want it to look nice as soon as we acquire it.
I'll just interrupt you real
Yeah.
quick. That's where I want to start. Once we get the deed for the property, Tricago owns
Yep.
it, how long now does it take to get that market for that house for sale?
So we currently have roughly.
What's the number? 1 month, 3 months, 6 months?
I can't give you a range because we haven't done the quiet title process as soon as we've acquired the property. So I don't know. It's been taking a little bit longer than we've expected because we're kind of moving through this for the first time. Hopefully that's going to speed up when we get the quiet title. Once we start the next.
So that's 9 months. So it's my understanding that this works in phases.
It's not, is this correct? You don't buy one house and then get it to market and then buy the next house and get it to market.
No.
You are in a position where you're acquiring properties first.
Yep.
And then after a certain amount of time goes by and you acquire those properties, I'm not even really Italian and I talk with my hands. After you acquire those properties, then you take a group of those and then you go to the next step, which involves the titling or the getting it to the market. So it's not a one, obtain it, get it, sell it. It's
Right.
So the reason why you haven't seen a lot yet is because they've been in the acquire property mode.
Yes.
So
It's all going through the legal process now.
Yeah.
Well, hurry up.
They don't know.
Can you pray about
my
that,
question,
John?
I'm all about controlling what you can.
John can pray.
All that
John
shit's
can speak
done.
on the property
18.
limit.
Yeah.
So we're over a year. What's the movement on that? Is it moved at all? I mean, what stage is it in?
It's in, right now, that one's in the, so originally we did the cohorts for the quiet title action by when we received the property through sheriff's sale. And by the date that one we received, it's in the third cohort, which we're actively working on with the title companies now to get commitments for.
All right, so at what stage do we then start doing the renovations to the house?
So some of the properties we're not going to renovate. We'll sell as is with that renovation list attached to the property and an estimated rehab cost so that somebody can acquire the property and do the rehab internally. Some we might rehab ourselves, but we're kind of still working on which ones we do and which ones we don't.
So if I'm buying a house, you know, so you keep mentioning the landscape maybe outside the front look pretty. That's all well and good, but anybody who's going to look at the house, as soon as they go into the inside or out back and sees that it's an absolute disaster, that could scare them away. Like this house here, it's got a door that leads to a 5-foot drop. I mean, that's going to take work to either seal it up or put a new patio in. I mean, if I'm just looking at this house, if this goes on the market as is with just a new roof, I mean, it's going to take a serious amount of funds to even fix this thing up. I
It's like people,
understand.
it's a different market. It's not a young married couple looking for their first dream home.
I understand. The house across the street from me has been vacant for 5 years. I actually tried acquiring it, but due to liens and whatnot, that it wasn't gonna work, which is fine. But I'm watching these guys go in there, and it's a lot of work to fix this up just to be able to sell it.
That's why it's expensive. Yeah.
So,
sorry.
the only market's gonna buy these houses are probably gonna be flippers.
There might be some rehab. Yeah, they also still have to fill out an application with us. Also, when we market our properties, we get appraisals on them first to see what they are as is and where is. So if they were improved. The assessed value isn't necessarily the price that we're going to list the property as. It could be lower or higher. It depends on the appraisal. They're professionals, so we kind of are looking at that as currently that's kind of how we're looking to list the properties. And it can cost a lot of money, but that's why we try to make sure that we have that information up front so people know what they're getting into. We are also looking into some programs that other land banks have where they will sell to responsible developers who will then rehab the property, and then the stipulation is they have to sell to an owner-occupant who has to live there for 3 years. So that's something we're looking into as we start putting more properties on the market, seeing what the markets look like, that maybe that's an option for us is that, somebody who wants to buy that as a first-time homeowner, that's probably a little bit beyond their capacity. That's a little scary. So trying to find people who we can work with, responsible developers who will rehab that property and then sell to an owner-occupant. So that is an avenue that we are looking at.
And there are also multiple programs for people, like, I remember in college, Habitat for Humanity, you can apply for grants to actually help you rehab the house for owner occupants, and by God, I had to go and help them for free, but whatever. So, I mean, that's something you can piggyback on to? I don't know if you've talked to them or anything like
there's
that.
some banks too that offer rehab loans. We've talked to some of them, so it's just trying to figure out like the best method, and I think part of that is too when we have them for sale, we'll see who's filling out applications, if there's any issues with it, and then take that data and figure out solutions to that as well.
'Cause I think ultimately the goal is to, I mean, everybody keeps saying flipper like it's absolutely a bad word, and I really don't see it that way. It could be a good thing because there are responsible flippers out there, and that's people that want to go in, rehab the house, sell it, make a few bucks, and then move on and do it again. And I think what we really have to look at is the whole thing is getting, and because I agree with you 100%. You get one blighted house, and then you're right, it's kind of cancerous, and it just keeps going down the road. And it becomes easier. And then that's when you get some people come in and I'll use the term like slumlord the house and barely get it to code. But then it starts to fall apart, where I would, in good faith, trust the vetting process of whom they're selling these houses to, whether that be a flipper or a single, somebody who wants to come in and buy the house. To actually, again, ultimately get it, not just getting it back on the tax rules, but also improving that community and improving property values.
That's the one big value of the land bank, is it gives taxing jurisdictions some control over disposition of the property. There's no other mechanism that gives you control over who gets that property at the end, except through the land bank. And that's powerful, especially in places that really struggle with slumlords and
Right.
some serious places.
And all your questions are good, don't get me wrong. We've been through this a couple years ago, and it was a lot of the questions that we asked and all of the concerns that we had, but you really got to start trying to stretch it out and look at that big picture and look at the cumulative effect of fixing just one and then another and then another. It really can make or break. I know when I was looking for a house in Monroeville, if I saw a condemned house, or sometimes even the grass was way too high, I stopped looking at that street, and all of this adds value to all of that.
So now it looks like it would be helpful if you could somehow find an affinity group or user group who has experience beyond what you have right now from around the country, and tap them, ask them for mentoring sorts of suggestions that you can cherry pick from. Are there such tripod groups around the United States?
We are actually, we work with the Center for Community Progress. They're a national organization that focuses on land banking, and we actually have technical assistance with them. We have monthly calls with them to kind of help us and also connect us with other land banks who, other land banks in different areas often are structured a little bit differently just due to like how the taxing and different things like that, but they help us connect with other land banks to learn about the resources. That's the Albany County Land Bank in New York is the one that actually will sell to a developer who will then only sell to an owner occupant. That's one of the land banks that does that. So we definitely are engaging with that's a great suggestion, and we definitely do that because it's very helpful.
How many houses have you actually bought and sold?
We own 32 properties. We only have one for sale right now because of that quiet title action process. It's a vacant lot in Edgewood, and so we haven't sold any yet.
How many houses are currently being renovated?
We're renovating one as a pilot project to see what renovations look like. We've had a lot of conversations with other land banks who won't do any of their own renovations because it just doesn't make sense. And instead they work with developers and contractors who already do that in-house. And so it makes more sense that way. So we wanted to do one to see it's a small row house just to kind of see what that looked like before we did it to a bunch of them, and then kind of go from there and adjust our model that way.
How many properties did you want to acquire, related to your question, before you go to the next phase? You guys can sit down. How many properties did you want to acquire before you moved on to like the next phase? Are you?
What's your sweet spot, like 30 or 300?
What's the maximum that you would take on until volume decreases?
We are currently going through the sheriff's sale process, so we're actively trying to acquire for 2020 is 19 more properties.
19 more. And do you have a list of contractors that you...
We're working on that. It's actually very challenging to find contractors in the area. So also, if anyone knows about contractor, please send them our way. But we've reached out multiple times to multiple contractors, and so that's kind of the rehab actually that we're doing in East Pittsburgh. We've been having some issues finding contractors to fulfill those roles. So that is definitely an issue that we've come upon.
So the roof that was put on, where did you find that contract? How did you put up a request for bid? I mean, how did you accomplish with that person to put it on?
Gary, our property development manager, did that. I think he basically, if anybody knew of any roofers, he reached out to. He had a huge list of roofers that he reached out to get pricing for. He recorded who he heard back from, who he didn't, and tried to get as many bids as possible. And it was actually really challenging for us to even find a roofer who would respond back.
Oh,
Thank you.
There's still a lot of work to do.
yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Anyone else have any questions? Do you have any questions, Mr. Clary?
Yeah, but I'm supposed to ask that question.
Go ahead.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Very informative
Thank you.
conversation that we had here. Hopefully we'll see you again.